Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us here for our first webinar of our Network Assurance Prep program. My name is Rigo Villa. I'm one of the community managers on the Cisco Learning Network, and I'll be your host today. In this session, we're going to be covering Network Assurance Prep kickoff with our two special speakers and subject matter experts. First, we're going to have content developer for learning and certifications, Brandon Cross. And then we have technical leader in ThousandEyes customer engineering at DL Hernandez. But before we get the session underway, I wanted to share a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First, I want to let everyone know that your mics will be muted. And if you have any questions during the session, we ask that you please post them in the question and answer panel, as that would help us manage and keep track of all of the incoming questions. Next, if you experience any audio streaming issues during the live presentation, I do recommend using the call-in telephone number that I'm going to be posting in the chat window here in just a moment. And at the end of this webinar, you're going to get a pop-up survey with a couple of questions about today's presentation. And we would really appreciate it if you can just take a moment to fill it out and share with us any thoughts or feedback that you may have about today's session. And last but not least, we highly encourage everyone to participate in our online post-webinar discussion after the webinar. That's going to be a great place for you to continue the conversation about today's topic. And you can also ask any additional questions you may have as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share the link to that discussion a little bit later on for you. And without any further delay, I am now going to turn it over to our first speaker to get us started. So Brandon, if you're ready, please take it away.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you, everyone. Here's our agenda. I'm going to introduce you to the prep program, do a little overview, then talk a little bit about the network assurance, in particular the certification itself. Then FDL is going to talk about a little bit of the self-study prep guide he put together, or him and his team have. It's a really nice guide that they've prepared and then going to make available to you. Got some technical topics that are going to be covered: Cisco ThousandEyes agents, outage analysis. We have a special announcement for you here at the near the webinar. I'll get to that here in a bit, and then at the end we'll finish with some Q&A. So here's your presenters once again. I'm Brandon Cross. I'm a technical education content developer. I work within learning and certifications, and then FDL is technical leader, ThousandEyes customer engineering. Hand it over to him here in a bit. But before that, I want to actually introduce you to this network assurance prep program, as well as introduce you how you can start preparing for your designing and implementing enterprise network assurance certification exam. So to start off with, you can use the tools that we're making available to you. There's this Network Assurance Resource Central page you can go take a look at. By the way, this link will be provided to you here shortly. We also have a resource page at the end of this slide deck or this webinar that we'll make available to you as well. But within this Network Assurance Resource Central, there's all sorts of resources there for you. There's links to exam topics. There's links to technical or tutorials. There's links to different trainings and all sorts of things that we have available in the realm of network assurance resources. So make sure you take a look at that. Also, you can watch the webinar recordings. So in this network assurance prep program, we're going to have a total of 5 webinars. But if you can't join us live, we are going to be recording them, and we will make these recordings available to you. And it's something, since we're going to be reviewing some questions that are similar to what would be in the exam, and as well as cover some technical topics, right? Even if you are joining us live, it'd be good to view those webinars in later date as well, just for some review while you're studying for your exam. Another thing here that you can use while preparing for your certification exam is review the self-study prep guide. FDL will introduce you to this here shortly. You can attend the entire webinar series. So once again, as I previously mentioned, there's 5 webinars within this series, and in each webinar there will be subject matter experts, and in each webinar we will focus on a particular exam topic domain. And so we'll talk about the exam topic domains here in a bit, but hopefully you can join us live for these webinars. Some other things you can do is ask questions here. So if as many of you are joining us live right now, at the end of this webinar we will have a Q&A, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have with the network assurance certification. Also, there is a community page. And so you can ask questions on the community page. You can think of this as also as like a self-study group where you can interact with your peers. You can have some engaging discussions with your peers, and could be a very valuable resource. So I'd recommend check that out. By the way, we will be providing you a link to this here in a bit as well. But anyhow, some other tips that we have for you when you're preparing for the exam is make sure you check out the exam topics, review them. You can find the link to the exam topics on that Network Assurance Resource Central page I just was talking about. Also, I think I already mentioned this, but yeah, leverage your community of peers. A lot of knowledge out there, and make sure you share your knowledge and ask questions on the community page and so forth, and you can get a lot of value out of that. Another thing, make sure you set a goal to take your CERT exam. So make sure, like, set a date and work towards that goal. If you set a goal and work towards it, you're more likely to achieve your goal and get your or become certified. So a little bit about the Enterprise Network Assurance certification. The certification is part of the CCNP Enterprise Certification track. It can be taken as a standalone specialist certification or combined with the Encore to achieve the CCNP Enterprise certification. If you're looking to become CCNP certified, you need to pass the Encore exam, which is the CCNP Enterprise Core exam. You need to pass that as well as one of the concentration exams. Now, one of the concentration exams is the Enterprise Network Assurance exam. So if you pass the Enterprise Network Assurance exam as well as the Encore, you will be CCNP certified. As I already mentioned, if you're not interested in becoming CCNP certified, you just want to become a network assurance specialist, you certainly can do that. The certification is a standalone specialist certification as well. Some other things to note about the exam emphasizes Cisco ThousandEyes. And so Abdiel will introduce you to this here in a bit. He's going to discuss some the agents on the platforms as well as some outage analysis. So that's one of the key platforms that you want to be familiar with as you're preparing for your exam. The exam is now live, so you can register for the exam. It's been available since May 20th, so if you're interested in taking the exam soon or want to set it up for a later date, you can do that now. Also, there is some training available in a e-learning format as well as ILT or instructor-led training format. Uh, in both of these trainings, there's a lot of good content. In particular, there are hands-on labs. There's 13 hands-on labs in this training with 4 different troubleshooting scenarios. So if you're looking for some hands-on practice when you're studying for your certification exam, I would highly recommend to take a look at some of this training. And once again, links to this training can be found on that Network Assurance Resource Central page that I was talking about earlier. Okay, so why would you want to become a network assurance specialist? Well, it will prove that you are able to maintain and troubleshoot modern multi-cloud networks that we use today. So in the past, we likely maintained and controlled all the infrastructure our applications ran on. Well, nowadays, that's typically not the case. We use all sorts of SaaS applications. We have various workloads in public clouds such as AWS, Azure, GCP, and we also often use the internet as our WAN links now. And so we don't really have control over these networks. And so how do we get that visibility and be able to monitor networks that we own, but also the ones that we depend on and rely on? Well, we can do that through platforms such as Cisco ThousandEyes, which is integrated into these certification. So who's this network assurance specialization for? Well, it's really anyone can benefit from this, really anyone in the IT or networking field, but in particular, if you're in one of the following or similar roles, you could really truly benefit from this specialization. You can see we have network operation engineer, site reliability engineer, cloud architect, WAN engineer, network and system admins, and application owners. All right, so now let's take a look at the Enterprise Network Assurance exam topic domains. By the way, I'm not sure if I mentioned this or not, but the full title of the certification is called Designing and Implementing Enterprise Network Assurance. It's the 300, 445 ENNA exam. you'll see throughout this presentation that we'll just simplify that a little bit and just call it enterprise network assurance. Anyhow, there are 4 domains within the exam. You'll see that the first domain is platform and architectures, which makes up about 20% of the weight of the exam. We'll talk about some of the platforms here in a bit in the next slide. In the second domain, we have data collection and implementation, which is about 25% of the weight of the exam. Here we're looking at configuring the platforms to provide us the data that we want to look at and need to help us maintain, troubleshoot, make sure our network is always operating very reliable. And so the third domain here is actually data analysis, which is 30% of the certification exam. And here we're really looking at diagnosing issues using the data that we have collected. And then the fourth domain, you see we have insights and alerts. That's 25% of the exam. And so this is, we're looking at how do we react to that data analysis. So maybe we can configure an alert where if certain thresholds are met, we can have a notification sent out or something like that. Or maybe we can optimize our network a little bit and alleviate an issue or prevent an issue from occurring. So a few things that you should be familiar with before taking the certification exam. You should be familiar with these tools you see here. Cisco ThousandEyes, right? This is going to be one of the key platforms you want to be familiar with, but also be familiar with Cisco Meraki, in particular the assurance pieces of the Meraki dashboard. So Meraki Insights, Meraki Health. Should also be familiar with Cisco Catalyst Center Assurance, Cisco Catalyst SD-WAN Analytics, and Cisco App Dynamics. Now, a lot of the technology I just mentioned, there are 1,000 integrations for them, so you should be familiar with those integrations. So you can integrate ThousandEyes into Cisco Meraki, into Cisco Catalyst Center, into Cisco Catalyst SD-WAN, as well as Cisco App Dynamics. You should be familiar with the agents, how to where those agents are located or where you can locate them, as well as be able to configure tests on those agents. Should be able to diagnose network and end-to-end device issues. I should be able to diagnose web application issues. Should also be able to configure alert rules. Some other things you should be familiar with are these integration types you see here, such as APIs, alerting thresholds, and open telemetry. And then you might also find some questions on the exam relating to optimization for network capacity planning. And so now I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to FDL. He's going to talk a little bit about ThousandEyes and the self-study prep guide.
Thank you, Brandon, and thank you everyone for attending this webinar. I'm really thrilled to be here today and to share this space with you. So let me talk to you a little bit more of the what do we mean about when we say network assurance. We really are talking about assuring and monitoring the network so that we can provide the best digital experience for anyone, because in reality, people care about being able to load their bank account and being able to load it fast, or being able to load a website or whatever application that they're using, their SaaS application, fast. And of course, if you are a remote employee, for example, you rely on some of these tools and you want them to be available for you to be able to work, or you're an end user, and being able to tell how the network impacts those services and applications, that's what we are talking about when we mention this concept of network assurance. And I just wanted to use that as a brief introduction to you all, but let me start by sharing some of the work that we are doing with the self-study prep guide. And I'm just gonna share my screen here for a moment to show you what we've done so far. So this is the part of the self-study guide, and this is only for domain 3. As we go on with the webinars that we've planned for you, we will share more as we are releasing them. So this is one domain out of 4 domains we started with domain 3. And I just wanted to start with the structure that the study guide has and that you can find for each and every task in there. So we start by providing you the cognitive level. In plain English, that means how complex is this topic going to be assessed in the exam. And then we give you a brief overview. You could call it the scope. In there we try to tell you where you should focus your attention uh, in order to be able to answer the questions that are in the exam. The second section is called key concepts, and in there, we don't really go deep dive into each one of the key concepts. We're pretty much giving you some very basic, in a couple of paragraphs, kind of definition on some very important concepts, but then we jump into resources. So we don't deep dive into stuff. We try to give you a brief overview, almost must know kind of things. And then we go into resources so that anything that you can't find in here or anything that you want to deep dive on, you can go onto any of these links and complement your studying. Then at the last section, we have sample questions. I think these are some of the most valuable contributions that we can give you, because these are exam-like questions that are trying to focus your attention and trying to train you on how to root cause a problem. So if I had to summarize what the domain 3 is all about solving problems. You're going to be presented with exhibits and you're going to be asked to find what is the root cause. So that's pretty similar to the role and the tasks that an engineer that's working on network assurance would be able to find. All right, so hopefully you find this useful. All of this information will be on the splash page for you. So that'll be a central hub location where you can find any of the resources that you need to prepare for the exam. I already shared the structure. Once again, in the study guide, we're trying to be very brief, very to the point, give you the cognitive level, which is the complexity of the task, how much you need to prepare. If you just need to study like the theory based on reading documentation, product documentation, or if you need to lab things up, or if you need to have experience analyzing information based on outputs. Now, let me stop here and mention that for about 40% of the exam is generally focused in configuring. So it'll be very important for you while preparing for this exam to test things out. Later on, we'll provide a link for a sign-up trial link, especially for you guys that are preparing for the certification. It's a 15-day trial, so you probably will have to use a couple of them, sign up a couple of times while you're preparing for your exam. But ultimately, do test things out. I highly recommend to try in the lab and to work with all of these things. Now, here, if you're looking at my screen, you're looking at this slide that's talking about strategies for preparing. And this is our suggestion to how you should prepare for the exam. And here is 2 different strategies. On the left-hand side, we have our strategy recommendation for those who are experienced in ThousandEyes. So if you have previous experience in ThousandEyes, if you have already some sort of a working environment, you feel almost comfortable with it, I would suggest for you to start with domain 3, because that's the biggest percentage that you will find in the exam. And again, to go with the part of the self-study guide that we're releasing today, that is focused on domain 3. I've already mentioned that you'll be presented with exhibits and asked to find the root cause of the problem, whether that's a networking problem, a security problem, security attack, etc. Then I suggest that you continue with domain 4. That's mainly alert, rule configuration, dashboard configuration, a few other topics here and there. Please go to the blueprint for a full picture. But this is a lot of configuration, so make sure that you know your alerts, make sure that you know your dashboard configuration. That'll be important for you to pass domain 4, followed by domain 2 and 1. Just based on how many questions you will get on the exam, this is my suggestion to a person that has introductory to intermediate experience with ThousandEyes. And if you're completely new to ThousandEyes, I recommend for you to start with domain 1. That's deploying ThousandEyes agents, followed by domain 2, which is pretty much tests configuration. Then domain 4, configure your alerts, dashboards, and end up with domain 3, which is analyzing network security problems, etc., so on and so forth. I hope my recommendations are useful to you, and but this is what makes sense for us. All right, so now I'm going to switch to a very brief demo on how to deploy ThousandEyes agents. But before I get started with that, let me introduce what options you have available. As Brandon already mentioned, some of the issues that we are trying to solve with network assurance, some call it digital experience monitoring, is, over the past few decades, we have seen this evolution from the data center workloads moving into the cloud, the app stack becoming, or the SaaS and APIs becoming the new app stack, working from anywhere instead of just the office, and the network being our main path to take us to things. Now, let me give you a very quick introduction to agents. These are the different agent offerings that we have at ThousandEyes. We have enterprise, cloud, and endpoint agents. And the demo that I'll be doing today will be focused on enterprise agents only. But I wanted to give you this, general perspective so that it can help you on your studying and preparing for the exam. So in a very summarized way, the way to see agents is, 1, where you can deploy them, and 2, what type of monitoring they can offer in terms of the perspective that they give you, and 3rd, how you manage them, or who manages them. The biggest difference between enterprise agents and cloud agents is that cloud agents are owned and maintained by ThousandEyes, whereas enterprise agents, you are responsible for installing them, configuring them, assigning tests to them, etc. So if you look at this slide, for enterprise agents, we have a huge amount of options for you to deploy them. You can deploy them as an OVA in VMware, VirtualBox, Hyper-V. You can also have a physical server. You can deploy the agent on a Docker container or as a Linux package. We do have a certain operating systems for Linux are supported only, certain distributions, I should say. We support the agent to be installed on Cisco ISRs, Catalyst, Nexus, Meraki MX, some models, Raspberry Pis, Intel NUCs, etc. So you can see how you can deploy in a very wide range of options. Then you have your cloud agent. Like I said, the biggest difference is you can start using cloud agents. You don't have to worry about the deployment, installing. You just pick them and assign them to tests, and you're done. And the endpoint agent, I won't focus on this, but it's also a very lightweight piece of software that you install on users, on employees' machines. Okay, so that's ThousandEyes agents in a nutshell. So these agents help you regain visibility, because you were already monitoring what's inside the data center, and probably your access, distribution, enterprise core network, all the way to the service edge firewall and one edge. But as we start to walk into the ISP, that's where we start losing visibility. We don't have that visibility today, but you have that with ThousandEyes. So as we go into the internet backbone, content delivery networks, the ISP closer to the application server, and finally the application server, all of these nodes in between are kind of the unknown. You have zero control and you have zero visibility. But if you deploy the ThousandEyes agents in the right place, you can regain this visibility. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip this, but let me just leave these slides for your reference. These are our top enterprise agent deployments. It's probably not a surprise for you all to see that, the virtual appliance that you can deploy in VMware Hyper-V is one of our top deployed agent deployment options, as together with the Linux package and Docker containers. These are all expected, I think. But one of the two agent deployments that are becoming more and more deployed are the Meraki MX devices and Catalyst 9 case. This is because you get to, if you have the right licensing, you can enable these agents there, and these are key points of presence for you to monitor from and collect information. We have several different options to deploy ThousandEyes. You can deploy them manually with all of these options on the left. And if you want to start deploying on scale, you can use certain tools such as SaltStack, Terraform, Cisco Catalyst Center, Cisco Catalyst SD-WAN, and Ansible. All right, so before I go to the outage analysis, let me start sharing my screen again, and I'll run the demo that I have prepared for you today. So let's start at AWS. Today, I'm going to demo how to provision a small instance that you can use to deploy your agent. So this is webinar agent 1. That's what we're naming it. Again, pay attention to the supported distributions. As of today, we only support Ubuntu 20.04. For the Ubuntu distribution, we also support Red Hat, CentOS, and so on and so forth, Amazon Linux. But just check the supported matrix to make sure that you are deploying the right option. Now, just going to pick something that allows me to install BrowserBot. BrowserBot is the component that will run web tests, such as page load and transaction scripts. If you don't have BrowserBot installed in the agent, you won't be able to run those types of tests. After I've chosen my instance type, which has a minimum of 2 CPUs and 2 GB of memory, that's the minimum. This one is a little bit bigger than that, but that's okay. I'm assigning my existing key pair. I'm just going to select my security group. These are all things that you can just pick from depending on your environment. Or if you're new to AWS, you can sign up for a new test or trial account, and that's pretty much it. These are all of the characteristics that we need for our deployment. Pretty much 2 things: the Linux distribution that is supported, and 2, the instance type that is going to support, in this case, BrowserBot installation within the agent, which is a minimum of 2 virtual CPUs and 2 GB of memory. So let me launch this instance. And of course, launch instance failed because this is a live demo and live demos always have problems. So let me just make sure I'm selecting the right instance. If not, I'm just gonna try a different thing. All right, let me do this differently. I'm going to select a private image and launch my instance from here. And all right, just going to select the same stuff that I had ready in mind. All right, launching instance. It's working. Let's wait for my instance to come up. It says it's running. So let me just connect to it. If you're just getting started with AWS, you'll need to download your key pair. Actually, when you create it on the EC2 instance page wizard configuration, it'll download it for you. You just need to make sure that you change the permissions of the public key, and that's pretty much it. Okay. Let's give it a few seconds to respond. This is supposedly all right. That's taking a while. All right. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to select an instance that's already running. And the one thing that I want to mention is on the ThousandEyes platform, you have to go to Cloud and Enterprise Agents, then go to Agent Settings. And in this screen, you will click the Add New Agent, then switch to Linux package. And these are the instructions for you to install your agent. So this is what we have to do on the instance that we've just created. It's a three steps only. If you want to install BrowserBot, which is the one that allows you to run page load transaction tests, you have to do the -B flag. And this is your account group token that's needed to match the agent with your account. Okay. All right. I don't think this is going to work for us today. Let me move.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm the only one experiencing it, but I'm not hearing any audio, and I don't see.
Correct. Abdel, we lost your audio, my friend.
Looks like he may be having some network issues.
I believe we may have lost Abdel as well.
Apologies, everybody, for the technical issues here. Please bear with us to see if we can have Abdiel rejoin our session.
While we wait for Abdiel Rigo, maybe there's a couple of questions in the Q&A panel that we can try to cover, and maybe Brandon can help us if we need a bit of technical depth on those. We'll see how that goes. We'll wait for Abdiel to come back in. Let's see. There's a couple of questions. Maxwell is asking about discount codes to take the exam. We are not currently offering any discount codes on the exam. However, there is the, no, I'm so sorry, I was going to mention the exam assurance program, but that's only for the core exams. So Maxwell, not at this time, but we will update folks if that information does change in the near future. We'll be sure to communicate that with everybody via email. After, if we are able to offer those discounts. Let's see, and then, okay, Mobin asks, Rigo, maybe you can help me tackle this one. My CCNP renewal is near, I believe. How can I get this exam? How can this exam help me to get my CCNP renewed? Do you want to cover the CCNP recertification options for Mobin briefly, Rigo?
Yeah, absolutely. So the exam can definitely help for your recertification efforts. You can actually, as far as the recertification options, you can use two separate professional concentration.
Brendan, is it just me or did we also now lose Rigo? Brendan, are you able to hear me at all? So it looks like my audio might still be coming through for folks. I got a couple of folks that have been able to confirm that for me. I'm going to just mute for a moment and we'll see what's going on with our other panelists' audio and visual. So I'm just going to ask the other panelists and presenters to drop briefly from the WebEx session and rejoin. So we'll try to get this rolling here in just a few minutes. Looks like Abdiel is coming back in and possibly Rigo.
Yes,
Let's
I'm
see.
back.
Hey Abdiel, how you doing?
Apologies.
Good.
I had a little bit of technical issues on my end as well. Sorry about that.
We had a bit of a glitch overall across the board, I think. Somehow I was the only one that maintained. Welcome back, Abdiel. That was fun. Yeah, if you can hear us okay and your audio is okay, do you want to try and just pick back up where you left off at the end of that demo, I think it was?
Yes, I'll just pick it up there because it seems to be working at the moment, and I want the audience to take this home with them. All right, so we apologize for that. Let me continue. I was saying that I'm into my EC2 instance. I'll just continue from here. In your ThousandEyes cloud and enterprise agents, then agent settings, you click add new enterprise agent, you copy these 3 commands, and you basically just paste them on your EC2 instance CLI. And this is going to take a few seconds, but it should be pretty straightforward. The first command is a curl command to download the install script. The second is changing the permissions, executing permissions to the install script. And the final is just executing the script. All right, so we're just gonna keep logs in the same location, and that's it. The one command that you need to remember is system control or systemctl status te-agent. That's what the process is called. And this says that the agent is active and running, which means that we should see the agent coming up here on the GUI. All right, so since I didn't provide any host name to the EC2 instance, it's just taking whatever it is. So it's taking this IP 172, the private IP, but we can see our agent name. And let's just rename it to webinar agent 1 and save the changes. The next thing that I'll do is I will run a quick test. So I go to test settings, add new test, web, and just for simplicity, I'll call these ThousandEyes portal page load. And I'll provide the ThousandEyes website. We'll leave it with 1 minute. And then I'll select my newly deployed webinar agent is not available yet. Let's go back and see why. Let me see in here. Yeah, it's reporting, so it should be available now. Let's refresh here. New test. Just gonna go with HTTP for now. Yes, ThousandEyes.com. 2 minutes. Enterprise. There we go. Webinar agent 1. Wonder what happen if we switch to this. Is not right. So probably the browser bot components had issues installing webinar HTTP test and create new test. So that's it. It'll take a couple of minutes for the agent to start running this test. But if you click on the views, you can start to see all of the metrics that are collected by this agent for this test. So this is what we call layer views. And you see that you will be able to get the web metrics. So you have availability, response time, throughput, and then you get on your agent to server, you get the network metrics. So the usual loss, latency, and jitter. And by the way, when you jump into this view, you will get a path visualization view at the bottom. That's basically painting the nodes that are in the path from your agent all the way to your target. So in this case, it seems that we have the ThousandEyes.com site being serviced by an Amazon CloudFront node. So you get the symbology here. So while preparing for your exam, make sure that you get used to all of this view, to the different metrics that you get, that the test that you're looking at, that the symbols, for example, white identifiable nodes. Ask yourself the question, why is that showing up like that? The documentation will tell you why it's not showing like that. So basically, the node is not providing any IP information to you. What do the red rings mean? What is the end-to-end loss? And so on and so forth. So those are details that I can provide as of now. We've deployed an enterprise agent as a Linux package with some problems. We've assigned an HTTP test to it, and we are collecting metrics that can be correlated. So in this view, this is where you would troubleshoot an actual issue and ask the question if it's an HTTP level problem or if it's the network that's taking you to the server. And in the path visualization view, you can determine which node or which hub or which ISP is responsible for the problem. This ends and this concludes the demo. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip the outage analysis. I will leave that for the next webinar, and we can continue with the following slides, if that's okay, team. All right.
Yep.
So, yeah, please,
ahead.
Brandon, take it
Sure.
from here.
Sure. Thank you, FTL. Yeah, so we've got a special announcement here for you. So there's a new Upskill 2024 multi-cloud promotion where if you pass or earn a multi-cloud specialist certification before December 31st, 2024, you get all these exclusive perks you see here. So by the way, the Enterprise Network Assurance Certification exam is one of the multi-cloud specialist certs. We do have a couple other multi-cloud specialist certs. We have cloud connectivity as well as a secure cloud access multi-cloud specialist. But anyhow, if you were to pass one of these certs and earn the multi-cloud specialist before December 31st, you will get a multi-cloud badge. In particular, if you pass the Enterprise Network Assurance exam, you'll also get a ThousandEyes badge. That's pretty unique and cool. Also, you will get a invite to the Special Learning and Certification Celebration at Cisco Live 2025. On top of all this, you also get free access to an annual subscription to Cisco Modeling Labs. And so, yeah, if you are able to get one of these multi-cloud specialist certs before December 31st, 2024, you get all sorts of pretty nice perks that you see here. All right, give me 1 second. It doesn't look like I can change the slide here. All right, there we go. Here's some resources. We've talked about some of these already. So earlier when we were talking about that Network Assurance Resource Central, that's that QR and the link that you see right there where you can access network assurance exam topics, tutorials, study materials, and more. Then in the bottom left there's a link and QR code to get to that self-study prep guide that FDL introduced earlier. And then on the right-hand side here, we have some QR codes to get to the ThousandEyes support community, as well as to get to that ThousandEyes free trial. So if you want to get some hands-on practice with Cisco ThousandEyes, that's probably a pretty good place to start. Also, definitely you can go out to those getting started guides as well has the official ThousandEyes documentation. All right, so here's our upcoming network assurance prep webinars. As you can see here, the agenda for the next webinar, we will be reviewing some enterprise network assurance exam topics. Also, we'll have some practice question review. So essentially, we'll be presenting some questions that are very similar to questions you would get in the certification exam, and we'll be going over those and reviewing that. Also, as at the end of this webinar, we'll have open Q&A session as well. You can see the dates of these, the next 4 webinars. We have June 12th, June 18th, June 26th, and July 10th at the times that you see there. And then we have a capture the flag event. I will pass it back to FDL to talk about this a little bit.
Yes, thank you, Brandon. So right after the webinar is finished, please join the CTF event, scan the QR code, and I will start it right when the webinar is finished. This will help you prepare for your certification exam, and you will be able to try some outage analysis, for example. There's a couple of missions that we'll enable for you, and we'll continue doing this throughout the webinars. And in there, you're kind of training yourself on identifying what's the root cause of the problem, and that can help you prepare for the main three. There's a few other types of missions that we'll announce in the upcoming events. Thank you.
All right, so now we're to the Q&A.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for that great presentation. Before we wrap up, we are going to take a few minutes to cover some questions from the audience here live. And I do see that we do have a couple of questions pending here. And Abdel, I'll come to you first on this one if it's okay. One of the attendees noted that you were using AWS on the presentation. And the question is, can the cloud solution be implemented on Azure or any other cloud provider?
Yeah, definitely. So the advantage with the Linux package is that you can deploy it anywhere where you have a supported Linux distribution. So whether that is on Azure or GCP or Oracle, wherever that is, you can deploy the ThousandEyes Enterprise Agent. Just keep in mind that these are direct internet access deployments. So as long as you can connect them to the internet so that they can register to the ThousandEyes endpoint, then you can deploy them pretty much anywhere.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next question that I see here is, the steps of the AWS, would those be available in the guide?
Those are not in the guide. I do have a tutorial in Cisco U that you can search for. It's called Deploying a ThousandEyes Enterprise Agent in AWS. Those have all of the instructions that I shared. Well, actually, those have the instructions for the demo I did today. So yeah, you can find them there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next question, is there a URL or documentation link for adding the Cisco switches to the SD-WAN Meraki for network assurance?
Yeah, I don't have the link right now, but that would pretty much be somewhere in the documentation for Cisco SD-WAN Center site.
No worries, no worries. And just to let our audience know, we do have a post-webinar discussion, so we could also include any resources in that post as well. So so we'll go ahead and have a look at this one, and then any resources will be added to that post-webinar discussion.
Yeah, and if if that question was meant to be around, how to deploy ThousandEyes agents on SD-WAN devices, yes, you can find that in the ThousandEyes docs site as well. That walks you through, the how to enable the using hosting and how to deploy it. I'll share the link in a few.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Another question that I see here is ThousandEyes also useful for wireless networks? Meaning, do you get all the necessary data?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. These are all very good questions. So that would be information that you can get by deploying the endpoint agent. So the endpoint agent gives you some passive data, not only like active monitoring stuff, because it will send some probes to the default gateway. So you get that visibility, and you get several metrics like signal strength, link speed, of course, the packet loss, latency, etc. To those points. And then if you want to monitor a particular application, SaaS application, or whatever that is, a website that you use, you can deploy a test and have that monitor the experience for that. You can also deploy dynamic tests, which will pick up your, say you are on a WebEx call and you want to monitor how that goes. So the agent will pick up on your traffic when that's happening and start giving you the metrics for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And one final question here before we wrap up. In ThousandEyes, can you do updates of devices?
So that would be like configuration management stuff. We have a feature in the product called device layer, but we don't do configuration management as of today.
Got it. Thank you so much. So with that final question and answer, I think we can go ahead and wrap up our webinar presentation for today. Brandon Abdil, I just want to thank you again for this great session and for sharing your knowledge and expertise with our audience today. I hope that everyone found great value in the today's presentation and that it would be helpful with your exam studies. I would also like to give a very special thank you to our panelists for lending a hand with all of the questions throughout the live webinar. We really appreciate your support. And for those of you who would like to revisit this session, we will have the recording available for on-demand viewing. All attendees will receive an email with information on how to access the recording as well as some additional resources, and that'll be within the next coming days. And just to reiterate, if you do have any additional questions about today's presentation or would like to engage further about today's topic with your peers, please add your questions or comments in our online post-webinar discussion to continue the conversation there. Thanks again to our presenters, to our panelists, and to all of our attendees for joining us here live. I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.